Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Shavuos daf, not Shavuos, excuse me. Today's daf yomi is Avodah Zarah. Daf Lama Gimel Avodah Zarah 33. We're going to start on Lama Gimel Amud Aleph on 33a. 4 lines from the top. Tana Rabban, the rabbis taught, Ovi Kochavim Aholech Yerid. There's an idolater who's going to a Yerid. What's a Yerid? Rashi says this is a market of idolatry. But they're not going to do worship, they're just going to do business. So the idolater is going to a market of idolaters. Whether on the way there or on the way back, mutter, you're allowed to do business with them. It's not 3 days before their holiday, so you're allowed to do business. But if there's a Jew going, mutter, on the way there is going, it's okay. On the way back, it's prohibited. So the Gemara asks the question, so why is the Jew prohibited on the way back to Amri? Because we're going to say, Avodas Kochavim Zabin. He basically sold idolatry. He sold idols. He sold these idols, and so therefore, so he has the money of idolatry, and that's a problem for you to do business with him. You're getting the idolatry money. So the Gemara says, well, all the Kochavim Nami name was Kochavim Zabin, was Kochavim Ikabadei. Why don't we say the same thing about the idolater, that you can't do business with him because he clearly sold idolatry, and so therefore he has the money from the idolatry in his possession? The Gemara says no. The reason is that all the Kochavim Amrin Glima Zabin Chamer. So we say that the idolater went to the marketplace, he went to sell a donkey or a coat, he was just doing business. But Yisrael, so Yisrael Nami Nema. Why don't we say the same thing about the Jew, that he was just going to do business? The Gemara says, if the Jew had a donkey or a coat to sell, he wouldn't have had to go to the idolater's market. He would have sold it by the Jews. So the fact that he had to go to the idolater's market, that indicates he was selling idolatry. So he has the money from the idols in his possession, and that's what we don't want you to do business with. So it says that those who come back from the market are permitted. This is talking about somebody who went to the market of idolatry, meaning to say coming back from the temples, then it's prohibited. But those who are going are habay, and those who are returning are permitted. Going there is prohibited because we're worried he's going to give praise to their gods. But coming back is permitted. So the Gemara says, when do we say it's permitted on the way back? Only when it's not coming back as a group. But if they're coming back as a group, Asurin, then we're going to say it's prohibited. Why? Because as a group, there's group things, so they might go back and give praise to their God. So therefore, it's only permitted if they're coming back individually, but as a group, to pull to return and give their worship will be much greater. So the Mishnah had said that when it comes to the flasks, the leather flasks of the idolaters, and the wine of the Jews, or the jugs, the earthenware jugs, and the wine of the Jews is inside them, then it's prohibited to drink that wine. It's prohibited to have any benefit. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. And the Chum say it's prohibited to drink it, but it's not prohibited to have benefit. So the Gemara cites Bryce and Tanarabana, know this of the Kochavim Kerudim, if they're smooth or Chadashim, or if they're new, Mutarin. Then we're going to say it's permitted because we don't think anything was absorbed. But Yeshanim, but if it's old, which means say it has cracks in it, umizufafin, or that idolater put in the zephes, is like this pitch, this finishing product, then asur, and then they were going to be prohibited, because if the Jew put the wine in them, it will be prohibited to have benefit, because if they're old, and so therefore the wine of the idolatry has been there a long time, the wine was absorbed in it. And also if you put in this zephet, this material, even if the wine of the idolater was there just for a little bit, it's going to be absorbed into the skin. So if it's new flask or a flask that was not lined with this pitch, it's okay if your wine was in it. But if the flask was older or they had this pitch, then if the Jew's wine goes in it, it's going to be problematic. So over Kochavim Ribibam the Ivdam and Asal Tochen Yayin, Visral Omed Agavav, in a Choshesh. Let's say the idolater, he was Ribivan. So basically, what happened was the idolater, he put the Zephet into it, and then he put the wine into it, and the Jew is standing next to him. Then we don't have to be concerned. So the Gemara says, hold on one second. Says the Gemara, so I don't understand that. And if the idolater is putting his own wine to it, what do we care if the Jew standing next to him? How does that help? This is what it means. Let's say the idolater is preparing it, and a Jew puts in the wine, and another Jew is standing next to it. So then Eino Choshesh. So then you don't have to be concerned. Then it's okay. So the Gemara says, well, if the Jew is putting in the wine, why do we need another Jew to be standing next to it? What's the difference? It's the wine from the Jew. So the Gemara says, because we have to be concerned that maybe the Jew is so preoccupied with pouring his wine into the jug that he didn't notice that the idolater did a libation. And so therefore you need to have one Jew pouring it in and another Jew watching to make sure there was no libation. Rav Zvid says, no, we go back to the original approach, that idolater was pouring it in, and a Jew is standing next to him. And so if that's the case, what does it matter if the idolater is pouring it in? What does it matter if the Jew is standing next to him? And here what we're talking about is the inner the kashadilei nazi kazerak mayim with it. So the time when the idolater is pouring in the wine, nevertheless, we're going to say at the time that he poured the pitch into the flask to make it this finishing product, then the wine, it's like water. When you pour water into pitch, it gets absorbed right away. So to here also that the wine will get absorbed into the pitch, and so therefore when it dries, the wine will evaporate, and so therefore the pitch was not going to be pushing forth the wine. Amar Papa Shmami Nami Rav Zvid. So we see from says Rav Papa, we see from Rav Zvid's teaching, this idolater who sent wine, who poured some wine into like a bowl of salt. The Yisrael Shari, that the wine will not prohibit the salt will be permitted because the wine will get absorbed right away into the salt, so therefore won't give off taste. So Maske for Ravashi says in that same case, Midami Hasam Kazo Ibud. There in the case of the wine, immediately the wine was destroyed when it hit the pitch. Hacha by the salt, Kazo Ibud. But here in the case of the wine and the salt, the wine is not being destroyed. Instead, it's giving taste into the salt. And so therefore, the salt on the utensil will be prohibited to have any benefit from. Then the Gemara says, Baradi Taya. So there was a Arab whose name was Baradi. Anas Hanu Zike Mirav Yitzchak Bar Yosef. He took some flasks from Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Ramabu Cham Rav Adrian. He put some of his own wine, his yayin, not kosher wine, into the flasks of Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, and then he returned them. Also, Shal Bei Midrashos, Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef came and asked the Beis Medrash whether or not he could drink from those flasks. Amroi Rabbi Yirmiyah Kachora Rabbi Ami Halacha L'Maitza. So he says this is what Rabbi Ami taught a lot, a practical halacha. And Malan Mayim Shlosh Yamim Marin, that you can fill up those flasks with water for 3 days and then pour it out, and then those flasks will be kosher. So that's how you get rid of this taste of the wine that was absorbed in the flasks. And Amar Rava but Rava says no, that it's not enough just to do that. You need to pour out the water each 24 hours and then do that for 3 times, and then that'll be kosher. So the assumption Savarmine, the assumption that Rav Yitzchak understood from this answer, Hani Milidi done, this hechsher of filling it up and pouring out the water from ace to ace, that only is if it was our flask. Meaning, if you have like the flask of Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, that at least first it was the wine of the Jew that was absorbed, and so therefore they're not as saturated with the non-kosher wine, but their wines of the idolaters that the wine was absorbed within them. Initially, it was Yayin Nesach. Whoa, he thought that this won't work. So Bakiyasa Ravin, but when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar Reish Lakish, Echad Shalonu v'Echad Shalahem. Whether it's our one or their one, this is an effective technique. Savra Vachabrei de Rava, Kamei de Ravashi, Meimer Hani Mili Nodos of Kankanim Lo. So he said, so Rav Achabrei de Rava thought to say in front of Rav Ashi that this hechsher of filling it up and pouring it out, that only works if it's nodos, if it's like these leather canteens. But but those things that are made out of pottery, these earthenware ones, low, that would not be sufficient. But they would need a different hechsher. No, either way, this is effective. So we learned that if we have these earthenware jugs of the idolaters, if they are new, they never had any wine, gerudim, and they're not finished with this zefa, with this pitch, mutar, and then they're going to be permitted if the Jew put his wine into them. But if they're yeshanim, mizufafin asurim, but if they're older or they have the pitch in them of the idolaters asurin, then they're going to be prohibited. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so now we continue. Baruch Hashem, Boker Tov. So the Gemara says, we're in the bottom of Lam Gimel Amid Aleph. So the Brisa says, how can you capture these jugs of the idolaters if they're old or they would pitch on them? If idolater put wine into them, then the Jew could put the water in them, and that would say how he would kasher them. He put in the water, pour it out every 24 hours, and then put in new water, and then it would be permitted. That's how Rashi explains it. That if the idolater put in the wine, Yisrael knows yamim mayim. He'll put in 3 days water, and he'll pour it out every 24 hours. So does it have to be 24 hours straight, or if it's, let's say, does 22 hours, then somebody pours it out, and then he does 26 hours? Is that okay? Mistama assumption is that it's not okay, but the post can discuss that case. So let's say the idolater put in the wine. The Jew can put in the fish brine or the fish intestines and kasher it. Meaning to say, you don't have to say specifically, you don't have to use specifically water, but rather you could use the fish brine or the fish intestines, and then it would be permitted. Meaning to say, it would be permitted immediately, even though you don't fill it with water, because the fish brine is like burning off the wine. And so therefore, that would be a sufficient method of koshering it. So the yeshiva had a following question on top of 33b. This idea that you could use the fish brine or the fish intestines to kosher the jugs that had the wine in them, is that even initially or only after the fact? And the kankanim were made from pottery. So Tashma, the Tani Rav Zibar Shayalokeh, kankanim and all the klavim. Chadashin, if they're new, no tzolchol yayin, you could put wine in them initially. Yishanim, no tzolchol tzur morios lechatula. So even initially speaking, you could put in the fish brine or the intestines and kasher it. Ba'minei Rabbi Yehuda Nisiya mi Rabbi Ami. Let's say you take the pottery jugs and stick them back in the fire and reburn them. Will that be okay? Will that be okay? So the Gemara says, Amalei tir sorif or lo kolshkein. He says if the fish brine works to burn it off and make it kosher, for sure the furnace should. So for sure it's okay. In Marnami, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, Gamli, I'm Rabbi Asi, I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Kan kanam shalov de kochavim. Also, let's see, you have the pottery of the idolaters, shechzir and kivshan aish, that you step back into the fire. Kivan shenashru is done once since the pitch, which is the finishing product that the idolaters put on, has been removed. Mao, would we say it's mutar? What's the law? It says mutarin. It's permitted. And Amar Avashi go tema adinatra and I feel rafai mirafa. Don't say it has to be removed, even if it get loosened up, even though it didn't fall off, it's still going to be kosher. Kimsa. So let's say you pour wood not on the outside, but on the inside, like these wood chips. And so there, the concern is that it melts before it gets really hot and burns it off. So Pligi Baravacha Ravina Achad Aser V'chad Shari. So one says prohibited, one says permitted. We pause and says the Gemara that it's prohibited. So what's the difference between sticking this and sticking it back into the furnace? So Tosfos explains, like I just said, that in the case of the furnace, since it was burnt from the outside, then it was really burnt up to a higher temperature. But here on the inside, since the fire is on the inside, the pitch will melt off right away, and so therefore you're not necessarily burning off the non-kosher. So question is, let's say you could burn it there in the inside long enough. This is a question we have with like kashering sometimes. Let's say you could burn it there long enough. If you would leave it there, would that be okay? So there, Rabbeinu Elchanan says in Tosfos, no, even that's not okay, because we're concerned that since you're worried it's going to break, you'll take it out even if you're technically burning it up. This is why a problem with kashering like crystal. You can't kasher because you're worried you're not going to do it properly and you're going to pull it out before it breaks. Then Tosfos quotes the Harav Rabbeinu Moshe Mikutzi. That's the smog. It's very late to be quoted in the Tosfos. He says the Afagav de Paskina and Hilchos Hakaman de Aser B'Kol Makom L'Chafos Achaves Al Aish Meish Kolo Kol Kach V'Chazak B'Mipinim Sheyadu Solet L'Chutz Mutter. And so that's considered like Hagolah, he would say. Then Tosfos goes into a practical matter about how you do certain things, very important for halacha ma'asav kasher. Can you stick beer into that barrel? Are you allowed to stick the beer into that barrel? Meaning to say, is that going to be permitted because it's going to cancel the taste of the wine? Or do we say, no, that you're not allowed to do it out of concern that you'll make a mistake? And if you start putting the beer into the wine barrels, then you'll start putting the wine itself into the wine barrels. And then it's giving off the taste into the wine. Rav Nachman, Rav Yehuda, Asri, Rav Ashari. So it's a dispute. Ravina Shari, Rav Chia, Brei, Rav Yitzchak, Mirma, Bei Shecher. He said you could put the shecher, this beer, into the utensils of the idolaters. But also Rami Bei Chamra. And then Rav Chia went and he made a mistake and put in the wine. But still, nevertheless, Ravina continued to allow it. Amar Ikra B'Almu. He says that was a one-time mistake, but in general, people aren't going to make that mistake. Rav Yitzchak Barbisna Avle Hanu Mani Defakunsa. He had some utensils that were made. He used to make some utensils out of dung of the animals, and there was yayin nefach in it, and he wanted to kasher it. So Malinu Maya Anchinu B'Shimsha. He filled it with water. He put them in the sun. And Paco, the utensils broke. I guess you're not supposed to leave the dung utensils in the sun because then they'll melt. So I'm with Rabbi Abba, well, now you prohibited them forever, meaning now you broke them. The rabbi said you're supposed to fill with water, but they didn't say you have to get it hot by putting it in the sun. So you actually are the one who broke our utensils. So this is a utensil that's made from a specific type of earth. This can never be kashered because the wine gets absorbed in it very well, and so therefore you can never get out the wine. By Klineser, What is this utensil? It's like a type of metal, that's made from the earth that basically you can get some type of salt for dyeing your garments from it. Anyway, the wine gets very absorbed in it, and you can't get it out. So therefore, if something was in there, it can't be kosher. The Beit Parzik Rafila. So this was the head of the idolaters. He was the governor of idolaters, and his name was Prozik. Anas Hane Kubi mi Pumpadisa. He took some drugs from Pumpadisa. Ramabu Chamra, he stuck some wine in them, and then Adrinu Nilayu, and then he gave them back their jugs. Also Shailu Rav Yehuda. They went and they asked Rav Yehuda. Amar, he said, Davar She'emach Nisul Kimhu, Mishach Shecham B'mayim. He said, listen, these things, he didn't put wine in there. Since he didn't put the wine in there for a long time, it wasn't there for a long enough period of time to make it non-kosher. And so therefore, you just have to wash them out. It's okay. Amar Avira Hani Chatz B'Shechimi D'Armai. These basically, they had these utensils that were made from red earth. Came into a bali tuba, since they don't absorb well. You just wash them out with water, and they're permitted. Amar Papa Hani Patvasa Debei Milchsai. These pottery utensils that are made from very hard ground. Came into a bali tuva, since they're not absorbed well into the wine. You wash it out, and it's permitted. Rav Asi also, Rav Ashi Shari. Rav Asi prohibited it. Rav Asi prohibited, Rav Ashi permitted. And the Gemara says, what are they arguing about? Ishatsubu of the Chavim Pam Rishon, if idolater drank from it the first time that they used it, then everybody would agree that it became prohibited because the pottery then is soft. We're talking about after they put their wine into it after it had already been used once, so it didn't absorb as well. Some say the first and the second times, everybody says it's prohibited. The third time is a question. The third time is permitted. Hi, mani de kunya. These pottery utensils of idolaters that are covered up with lead on the inside. If it will be white or black, shari, it's permitted because the lead, it's like a glaze. It's not like what we call glaze today in the store. The word glaze can mean different things. This glaze in those days was the lead glaze, which I think we call it because brain cancer or something. So anyway, it's permitted because it makes it that the wine is not absorbed. But Yeruka is like a yellowish green, then it's also, then it's prohibited mishum de mitzvah because that does absorb. The isbu kartufe, but if there are cracks, cool. So everybody would say it's prohibited. Toroshma meimar kunya, this pottery utensil, bein uchma, is covered with lead. Bein uchma, bein chivra, black or white, bein yeruka or yellow, shari. In modern Hebrew, yeruka is green, but in the Talmud it's usually yellow. So Maishna, so the Gemara asks the question. Oh, this is the next sugya. So we'll stop here. This is today's daf. A big shkoyach to everybody. Yeah, shkoyach.
Thank